Welcome back to the SEAM Studio, and in this series carrying on with flight safety, and this time I'm going to look at airspaces. Now I know that sounds a little bit boring, but once you get in trouble it's not so boring anymore, so just pick up the main ideas, and that's all that I'm trying to achieve on this side. And now you're immediately going to jump in and say, but I don't want to know about all these airspaces. And I know you don't want to know about these airspaces. And for instance, the Class A is above flight level 200, and that will obviously be the oceanic airspaces. Class B is not in South Africa. And let's have a look at the ones that is very important to us, and that will be the Class C. And maybe I should then erase that and say the Class C is, now in the case of an ATZ, that's an air traffic zone, and I'll show you later on, the air separation will be, and that's in other words the space below flight level 200. Alright, so most common one, Class C. Class D, all controlled airspace below in the case of an ATZ, only George so far with IFR separations for a Class D. So really also not one that we use. Class E not really used. And then all advisory airspace, F and G, is all information airspaces. Now it's going to become a little bit more clear. So let me get this clear and say, okay, what we need to understand is we're going to use Class C, and from time to time F, and from, well, we're definitely going to use Class G as well. So, alright, that's just for the introduction. Class C, Class F, and Class G. So let's go here. The scope here, airspaces in general, airspace controlled, airspaces not controlled, just to show the differences there. And then here I've got a strange one in here, private airspaces. We'll see if that actually do exist or not. Safety solutions, safety enhancement. Right. Starting off here to say my sky. What is my sky? That's where I am, and that's the sky I occupy at the time. Now remember, you can say it's your sky, but that hasn't got a definition in the greater thing of things. Wherever you are is going to be in a designated controlled or a designated uncontrolled airspace. And that is going to be the trick. All right, controlled airspace, a generic term to cover the different classifications of airspace defined dimensions within which the ATC has got a service to provide in accordance with the airspace classification. So controlled airspaces in South Africa, A, okay, B we know is not used, C, D, and we know that D is not used. Right, a little bit more to the guys. Sometimes I talk about us, not in a bad way, but I mean we're the bottom feeders, we're flying low. We're not in the oceanic routes or up there, and we all fly maybe up to flight level 100, maybe 115, but nothing higher than that. All right, so VFI shots shall be conducted so that the aircraft is flown with visual reference to the surface by day and to identifiable objects by night. That's just the definition as it comes out here. And at no time, now listen to this one, this is something new, and let me put that in red. At no time above more than 3/8 of cloud, not above 3/8 of clouds, within a radius of 5 nautical miles of the aircraft. Right, be careful. This has got to do nothing else but to say, okay, the people talk about scud running, or we're going to fly above the broken cloud and stuff like that. Here it says VFR, maximum 3/8, and it must be with at least a radius of 5 nautical miles of the flight of the aircraft. So if I'm just above that, Is it 5 nautical miles to the side? Is it a cylindrical, well, spherical, cylindrical, whatever? Is it a sphere around us? Well, this is what it says. It says, in conditions of visibility and distance from ground equal to or greater of those specified, and here I need to get your attention to CAR 910621. So for those of you that are busy studying and working with this, CAR 91 gives us the rules of the air and just go through part 91, South African Civil Aviation Regulations, part 91, and then you obviously get the technical standards of part 91 as well. IFR, let's just see what the meaning is here. All flights that cannot take place within the VFR limits. All right, so we don't have to define IFR. Once we have defined VFR, everything that falls outside that is IFR. There's no gray, there's no in between. It's either or. All right. So this is the only part that I can add here. Sometimes we think there's sort of like a layer between IFR and VFR. Simply, the definition says after all the flights that cannot be done VFR. And point. That's it. Air traffic service units. All right. We've got our Johannesburg information services. So, and we're looking about Johannesburg, south, central, north, northwest, northeast, and all that. All right. If you go onto Easy Plan, it's very easy to see where you've got the separation of all these separate information services. Okay. Contact with the ATC requirement in all uncontrolled airspaces above. Now this is important again to us. In all uncontrolled airspaces above 1,500 feet HL with the following exceptions. Well, there is obviously an exception that says, listen, okay, in uncontrolled airspace below 1,500 feet. All right, so you already said it's above, so it's below, you don't have to talk to them. But now we're above. In special rules area, those have normally got their own frequency, and again, the routing through the special rules areas, very, very important. But you're not going to be in control. You're going to be able to talk there to the other VFR traffic in the special rules area. Then there's obviously your designated flying areas, which has got normally 1248 as there. But now, whoa, okay, sorry, I'm flip-flopping in and out. But remember now that not all flying areas has got 124.8. Some places there are just too many training areas close to each other, so they actually, you'll find, for instance, that the Johannesburg flying area is not on 1248. But here in the remote areas, 1248 as a rule. But that's where the flight planning comes in. You really have to go and look it up. All right, joining under controlled circuits, normally 2,000 feet above ground level. It differs, uncontrolled circuits. Some uncontrolled circuits has got their own frequency. That's also published. And then if there's not a published frequency, then that will also be uncontrolled 1248. But in the cases you're not going to talk to a controller. Okay, so contact with an air traffic unit there above 15, except in these cases. Yes, that means if you're flying from here to Johannesburg or from here to Cape Town or wherever you're flying and you're going to fly above 1,500 feet, you're going to have to become part of the semicircular rule. You're going to either fly at evens +5 or odds +5. All right, depending on your heading. All right. Let's have a look. Uncontrolled airspace or class F and G airspaces is the portion that has not been designated as. In other words, F and G is other airspaces but A, B, C, D, and E. Now remember, E is not in use, B we haven't got, so normally we're talking about C and D, and A is more for the airline guys, all right? They up there, they above flight level 2, 4, 5. We're not even going to closely get to there. So for you and I, mostly it's going to be Class C. Okay. If IFR receives advice, VFR only receives information. Now, advice and information regarding other traffic. So the IFR will be slightly more controlled, in other words. So they are giving route, and they will give, you know, how to avoid. But if you're in VFR, then they will just give you information. You can do with it what you like. They've got no control value over you. And then obviously the charge G extends from the surface to the base of the overlying Class E, which we haven't got here. Although ATS has no authority and responsibility to control air traffic, only gives information when asked. All right, so it can be classified as a Class G, no problem, but then obviously you ask for information. Right, now we're going to have a look at the controlled airspaces. And I'll get through this, and when we get to the, let's call it the pictorials, where I've got it on pictures, it's going to become a little bit more clear. There's a few points here. A few important things to remember if you're planning to enter these spaces. Okay, first one, and this is why I'm presenting this, is so the first thing that you can remember is get permission. Otherwise you will make someone at Air Traffic Services rather angry, and you would possibly put your safety and the others in danger. Do not cross the lines unless you have asked and have been granted permission to do so. Okay. Yes, you can have your transponder off and you can go in, but many control airspaces got radar and they can see there's somebody coming in and they can see a moving object, and you really want to take the chance. Well, don't take the chance, because you're putting everybody's life in danger. So the appeal here is stick to the rules. Ask permission. It's as easy as that. The worst that can happen is that they will say no, and they will reroute you around the controlled airspace. That's what they will do. If nothing else is there, they'll say, yeah, come on, go through, no problem. Okay? Or, well, that's what they should do. File a flight plan. It's compulsory that a flight is received by the ATSU at least 10 minutes before you expect to enter the controlled airspace. Oh my goodness. A flight plan 10 minutes before that. Now, all right, this is that is getting down to the nitty-gritty, because we've got to file a half an hour before, and then it gets disseminated inside the system. So, but at this stage of the game, I'm flying from A to B. I haven't gotten a flight plan in. I don't desire to file a flight plan in the air. So I'm just talking to the information service. I'm just flying, and they've got no responsibility to warn anybody that you're coming. So be very, very careful about this loan. The fact that you are speaking to Johannesburg Central or whoever does not give you the right to get into the airspaces of, let's say, Kimberley, Bloemfontein, Durban, or any of the other places, whatever the case might be. Now, what I'm thinking is that, even for short hops, it's a good idea if you've got a flight plan. Is it a little bit of a pain in the butt? Yes, it is. It's been made so easy now with the electronic format that one can put it in, and really, it's one of those habits we must just get into. All right? Do the flight plan. They know about you, and you will find that they're more comfortable if they actually know about you. And they will give you nice guidance. You want the guidance, okay? Above 1,500 feet, you have to speak to them. Anyway, okay, two-way radio must be able to maintain contact with the ATSU at all times. If you can't, then you'll need to get special permission. All right, and you'll immediately say to me, yeah, but there are places in South Africa where I can't get hold of anybody. All right, that's fine. And that's then where you get your blind transmissions. Once you've flown through that area, you will find that they'll start talking to you again. It is so that we haven't got 100% excellent coverage of the whole country. It's, let's call it one of those things. Our flights, so be sure to maintain altitudes. All right. These days, remember, we are flying so accurately on GPS that it's easy that we can fly exactly the same route within a meter from the other guy in front of us. Right, so let's have a look at a few of the airspaces. I'm looking here at the Alpha, and that's the high one. All right, no VFR flight. No VFR flight is allowed above flight level 195. And you'll say, yeah, but the book says from 200 on you can't. Yes, from 200 on you can. And the one just below 200 is 195. VFR. Okay? And, well, there you've got it. So that's the lowest flight level that you can. And so A is not for the bottom dwellers here. Class C, it's the most common one in South Africa, catering for both IFR and VFR. Yes, it gets very busy. ATC controls the aircraft. IFR traffic is safely separated from the VFR traffic. You must, however, be aware that VFR traffic is not separated. VFR traffic is not separated from each other. They'll give and they'll advise you and they'll tell you about that and they'll tell you where to look, and they're quite concerned. But they're not responsible when it's VFR to actually physically separate you. So they're not going to say to you, okay, climb to the following or descend or do this or do that. They're simply just not going to do that. Or that's not the idea. ATC does not provide traffic information for the combination. So long as you pay attention, you'll be safe. Okay. Right, Class D. And this new one we know, and we've said it's only for George at this stage, so I'm not going to get too much into this one, but it is there, and it is still one of those controlled airspaces. If we go to the uncontrolled airspaces, then, and I'll show you on the picture just now, it'll make it a bit easier, F and G, those are the two, F and G, uncontrolled. Uncontrolled airspaces will not instruct you what to do, but if you have radio contact, they are available to provide you with information, so don't hesitate. All right, so I'm flying low level and I want to know what is the local QNH. If I've got contact with any ATC unit, I ask them, and they will do their best to give you the information. It's their job. They will do it. So don't hesitate. Ask. It's quite easy. Traffic receives advice regarding traffic, yet VFR only receives information. Here again is the advice and the information difference, and you can go and look up those differences in the advice and the information. But remember, information has not been worked through, and in other words, they're just telling you what's happening, and there's absolutely no suggestion or nothing else. It's just, man, there's an aircraft moving at this, and that's it. But when you're under IFR, then it'll be a little bit more intense, a little bit more control, even though it's an uncontrolled airspace, but they will give you direct advice. Suggest you do the following. Okay, all aircraft receive just information, there's nothing else. All right, and this is one of the pictorials I was looking at, and I'm just working on this here. I want us, on the first one, to look at the controlled airspace. Okay, just the controlled ones. Now, once we look at the different airspaces here, I'm just going to clear it up again, and we say that we start from the bottom. We've got the air traffic zones, control areas, terminal areas. Then you go to the routes, which is above 195, which no VFR is allowed, and then the oceanic at the top. Where are we normally worried about? We are normally worried about these ones in the lower flying or the VFR flights. ATZ around, right there, around the airfield. Then you get the CTR. That's normally a little bit of a bigger space and it's got a height. Then you get to, well, there you can see the CTA is no VFR above, but again, B, C, D, and E. But the TMA, these are actually the ones that we, wait, let me clear that one for us there again and say, so we worried about the TMA, the CTR, and the ATZs. Not as frequently. The frequent ones that we use where we are those two. And so if you go to the controlled area, it just simply means you've got to know that you're below the CTR. Yes, and then you must know about the TMAs that you don't get. The moment you're in a flight level, you get into the TMAs, then they will have different names, and we will certainly get to those different names just now when we look at one or two actual maps. All right, so from the controlled area side, these are the words that we need to know. We're not going to fly there. Very seldom we're going to fly there. We can't. It's above 195 if it's VFR. So it's only the bottom few that we're worried about. All right, now let's have a look at the uncontrolled. Now you'll see that I've put in there, it's designated uncontrolled. In other words, it's not ignored airspace. It's physically demarcated. So there's nothing as no. There's limits to all the airspaces. So let's have a look at them, and I try to mix them up a little bit to make it the picture. There you've got your F and your G. Remember, F is just advisory and information is then the G. And remember that in G, everybody gets information. In F, IFR traffic can get a little bit of advice, but they say VFR will get information. All right, so these are the airspaces. Then remember there are information routes, and those are very frequently flown routes, and they are marked, and in this case I showed there with a F, so it'll be W whatever F, and that'll mark it's an information route. It's uncontrolled, but those are frequently flight, and they said, okay, let's just indicate that this does carry a lot of traffic. Okay, then we get to the special rules area, and we're quite familiar with that. That's all VFR, and that's got its own frequency. And then in your danger areas, I singled out the training areas. I just singled. They are FADs, all of them. So you will get your danger areas, your restricted areas, and your prohibited areas. So let's have a look for now what is on the cards here. So what we've got here is just a quick reference for controlled airspaces, and seeing that we operate mostly in Class C, that's just highlighted. The first thing, you must have radio comms. Okay, and you must be able to obviously squawk something, so you must have the equipment. Minimum pilot requirements, look here, student pilot license, no problem. So anybody can fly there. Two-way radio communication, yes, you have to have it. Well, let's go up. Prior two-way. Remember I said you cannot enter the airspace if you haven't said to them, hey, I'm about to enter. And then they will. You can't just enter. You've got to ask, hey, I'm on my way. I'm so many nautical miles. I want to go there. Clearance through your airspace, or whatever the case might be. VFR visuality, they talk about 5,000 meters, so 5 kilometer visibility. And then the next one here is clear of cloud, vertical 500 feet, horizontal 2,000 feet. And you'll see in the newer that 2,000 feet, I think, comes down to 600 meters is what they're talking about, the horizontal. But the vertical they'll give you in feet. So that's the criteria there. Very nice quick reference. And VFR aircraft separation, only IFR gets separation, not VFR. Will you get advisories? Yes, everybody will get advisories. So let's just clear this up and say, if you now look at all the airspaces and you, for instance, look at an airspace G, there's going to be no requirement. Anybody can fly with that, no requirement, but they still stick to the 5 kilometer visual range, and they say vertical clearance of cloud. Vertical clearance is 1,000 feet, where here they've got horizontal, sorry, why am I saying vertical clear of clouds and horizontal 1,000? I see there is no vertical, but the horizontal still stays. Well, it's quite a bit less now. And you are pretty low, because remember, you'll be below 1,500 feet. And if you want, you can get ATC information. Let's have a look. If you're in a class F, the ones that we fly around in, there's no need to ask to be there. You can have a student pilot license, two-way radio communications, not required. So you don't have to talk to any ATC. The visibility, now you can start having a look at the visibility straight through the whole thing, is 5 kilometers. So put that in your head and keep it there. 5,000 meters, 5 kilometers. There we go. VFR, minimum distance from cloud. Again, here we're looking at things such as vertical 500 feet, horizontal 2,000 feet. Vertical 500, 2,000, vertical clear of clouds. They say, don't say how much, but horizontal less. So G is the lowest classification because you're flying low. And when you go and look in, you will see that the range is quite different at that lower. And then you will obviously have to read up about special VFR as well. And remember that there's a difference between helicopters and fixed wings. All right. Now, having said all this, the thing that we now have to look at is to say, note, at the bottom here, I say that these differences, which is clearly stipulated in AIC, but you know, you can go to AIC 40.4 and the latest version, but the information is available in multiple sources. And the CAA website will sort you out 100% if you need this. So there's just a couple of things to remember, the basics. And to me, the basics are everything is horizontally 5 kilometers. Okay? If you're in controlled airspace, you better get permission before you go. If you're not, then it's not. So F and G, which is your non-controlled airspaces, you don't have to talk to anybody. So far it makes sense. Anybody can fly anywhere. All right? Obviously, if you go and fly at flight level 2, 4, 5, or whatever, you need an IF rating, and so student pilot license cannot have an IF rating. Okay. But here, you can see if it's in classified, must I be able to talk to somebody? Yes. If, otherwise, no. We still got the 5 kilometers. And now let's see if we can get a common thing for the distances. 500 feet vertical distance sounds to me pretty much. You'll see later on in the special rules, it'll come down to about 100 or whatever. But as a rule, just remember 500 feet is your vertical reference, and you might as well keep into mind this one, 2,000 feet, or I think it's 600 meters that they say. Because remember, we want lateral to work in meters and vertical to work in feet. And then separation, well, IFR will get separation, and there will be none here. Class D, we're not really going to be in. And then Traffic advisory, well, if you ask, they will always give you information. All right. Now, there's no such thing as private airspace. I think that sorts the private airspace one out. All right. Now, listen to this. Circuits and space above private airstrips are part of the Class G airspace and does not require contact with any ATC. Owners of a private strip must transmit TIBA, traffic information broadcasts by air. That's the local frequency. Most in South Africa is 1248, unless obviously there's an area difference. So let's get this. There's no private airspace above your private strip. Your private strip belongs to Class G airspace. Nobody has to talk to anybody. You cannot decide that you're going to run something on that private strip, like for instance, a flying school or whatever you have to, you can't. You have to register it and you must go through the processes. But the reason that we're saying this is don't try and claim the airspace above your place. You can't. In terms of the designated areas, it's a Class G airspace. All right. Enough about that. Let's get into some, just to show what we were talking about. Here you can see FAD. There's a FAD, there's a FAD. So those are danger areas, and normally there's something happening there, and here from mean sea level to 2,000 feet, and over the land they will talk from ground to 2,000 feet altitude, and so on and so forth. So the FAD is quite straightforward there. I like this one because here I can also give you FIR. It's not that big, but that is the Kuiberg. That is the area around the nuclear power station just north of Cape Town here, and that area inside there is a restricted area. You can't go in there. You just don't go in there. It's totally restricted. It's not even from now or then. You can't go in. People that actually fly in there, well, I don't know. I have never heard of anybody flying in. All right. You and I, we don't fly in there. So stay away from the prohibited areas and stay away from the restricted areas. The danger areas are areas where we can, but we must know that there is a heightened activity in that area, and so we must go. What is also interesting to me on this very particular one is that here you can see Cape Town, and here you've got Eysterplaat. I'm just going to wipe this off here again. You can. I'm just going to make a wider circle around the blue here in the center. There. That blue circle there, and that is Eysterplaat's ATZ, and it's got a little bit of a control areas where, well, a control zone, so it's a CTR as well, but not very high, because remember this falls within the Cape Town area, so you know, you're going to have this kind of thing that is there. And Eysterplaat is just in there. And then you'll say to me, but can Eysterplaat do what they want to? And the answer is actually no, because they lie slab bang into everything. And I can promise you that the ATC at Eysterplaat is under not the control, but seriously advisement of what is happening in the main airport. So if the main airport declares that VFR is now out of the way, then Eysterplaat will have to adhere to that. Remember, there are special cases. Eysterplaat is military, so don't go off the rockers on whichever side now, as long as you know that the airspaces are seriously controlled and this is not a place. It's not that difficult. Once you've flown there once or twice, it's not too bad. All right, what I wanted to show on the other side here, just close to Bloemfontein, here you will get your different TMAs. There's a TMA Bravo, Charlie. And you can see on that, it says to you flight level 145 to flight level 085. So if I am below flight level 085, I don't have to. Well, then I'm not in TMA Charlie. All right? Here's another restricted area, and it says from the ground up to flight level 195, and you can see it's a restricted area. It's the same as the restricted area here around Kuberg. Okay. You can't go into those areas. You're going to get slapped on the wrist. Sometimes the slap can be not so bad, but I can promise you if you fly into Kuberg's area, there can be serious, the repercussions will be different from flying into an area where no great activity is taking place at that moment in time. But in Kuberg it's taking place all the time. But we treat all the places all the time. And ATC, if you're on a flight plan, they warn you, they say, do you know that there's a FIR in your flight plan route? And you say, well, then you can't say, you better go and look. ATC will never talk to you about a restricted area if you are not about to fly through that restricted area. Okay, enough about that. So go and study these things and just make sure that you don't, open up your ribcage too much. A couple of preferences here, just to understand that, remember the emergency flights will take overall preference. Airliners will take top priority. Always IFR flight plan. And the IFR flight plan will always get preference and preferential and precedence before you. That's it. That's the rules, and that is how it's going to stay. Now you're going to say to people, but what if the airliner comes in, he was in an IFR flight, but he's now saying he wants to do a VFR routing? In our regulations, it stipulate quite clearly that the airliner can do that. It can say, listen, I want to break away from my full IFR approach and I want to continue with the VFR approach without cancelling or changing his flight plan. So even though the airliner has gone visual now, they will still have IFR and clearances. They will still enjoy separation. They'll enjoy everything. Although they said they visual and they go. ATC will still watch them like a hawk. All right. IFR will always have preferential treatment of VFR. Normal commuting traffic is then, and training is last in the line. Flight safety, the highest law, and this is, I just want to make sure that we understand that irrespective of what you are flying, the highest law in flight safety is, flight safety application by pilots and ATC alike. So I can give you the preference that you are allowed, and that is mandated I must give to you. But if there's an unsafe situation, I dare not do that, because flight safety is above. Because what must I do? I must safeguard you, even if you're amongst other VFR traffic. So remember, you don't always get your way, but it is for safety's sake, and it's really for nothing else. To have a preference means that you will first consider when the parameters of safety have been met. Emergencies or the declaration of emergency will always escalate the affected escalation. The aircraft now, he jumps the queue. He gets there. But listen to this. Declaring a false emergency is punishable in any event. And these declarations will be investigated. And I can promise you, if you have given a false declaration, you're going to be in big trouble. Now, I know that sometimes it's easy to call, bingo, I haven't got more fuel, I'm low on fuel, then they break everybody off and they let you land. They're going to check, because they would want to know why you're low on fuel. Now, there's aircraft that will be low in fuel like that. I mean, your fighter aircraft will be like that. The rest of the aircraft, No, not with the fuel planning that we can do. Remember, your fighter aircraft can't do the fuel planning. They haven't got the space for all that tonnage of fuel. They need to make up the weight with bombs and with other stuff. Okay? Now, let me not get into that. So sometimes you will hear that they will call a low emergency. The rest of that, if the airliner can say, for instance, maybe he's number 5 in line, he says he's got a terribly sick patient on board, and then it's declaring, hey, we need preferential treatment, and they will be checked. So be very careful using those privileges. Airspace infringements necessitates compulsory reporting by the ATC and will have a consequence. So a lot of people say to me, yeah, man, I just put off this and I put off this. We're not in the game of putting off this and putting that. That's dishonesty, ill-disciplined, and is not part of our culture. Period. All right. But should you decide to do these things, remember that there are such things as radars, and they do detect there is a moving target. And they can see there's a moving target through their airspace. And it's very easy for them to put 2 and 2 together, because they can see where the plot comes in, they can see where the plot goes out, and by just listening out, they can 99% ascertain who actually did the incursion. So remember, if the incursion happens and they've got to break off any other aircraft, then it becomes a serious incident. And a serious incident means that somebody is going to pay for that. And I'm talking money now. You are going to pay for the diversion of the other aircraft. Your license will be on the line. All right. So this is actually bad. You can't claim ignorance either, because then you shouldn't have had a license. Sure. All right. But don't worry. Just talk to them. Know where you're going. Do some flight planning. Incursion space, runways, extremely dangerous. Ensure proper flight planning. Okay. If you feel intimidated or disorientated, no matter what the reason, do not hesitate. Contact the ATC sooner. It is their job to help, but they could steer you away. But remember now, for instance, it says so in our regulations that if you're a student, then you start off by saying that you're a student pilot. And then they must break up the information, and giving you a string of information, they've got to break it up in shorter strings. All right? It says so in the rules. So, but they will not know that you're a solo student. Just say, solo student. All right. And you will get different treatment. Everybody had to begin somewhere. It's nothing to be ashamed of, and it's nothing to feel scared of. Just do it, and you will see that the help will be forthcoming. Remember, we share airspace, so we need to be pretty considerate. Planning. All flights must start off with planning. If you do not plan, you're going to fly yourself into trouble. Old planning is great, but old planning verified in terms of no frequency is greater. Okay? Somebody else's flight plan is bad. Do not go somewhere we haven't gone with somebody else's. You haven't got the faintest idea what their chain of thought was when they worked it out. So this is I think it's pretty important. All planes may have unchangeable information, that's fine. But there will be possible variables, and that's where the trick comes in. Back your basic plan, attend always to the variables, never assume, always verify. So, a couple of tips. You cannot enter controlled airspace unannounced. Okay, got that. Always file a flight plan to a controlled airfield. Got that. Filing a flight plan is definitely worth the few minutes. Accept that. Do not venture where you have no idea and you have not done flight planning. I must be quite honest with you, twice in the Tempe circuit, people that hasn't flown didn't know there's a frequency change and we're talking about meters, you know, between impact. Well, and when you get that person on the ground, yeah, I haven't flown for a while and I haven't done it. Really? That is not, that is an excuse, but it's not a valid excuse. Ignorance can never be a valid excuse in a tightly controlled environment. It's nonsense. However, do not hesitate to ask. If you phoned me, I would have told you. Adhere to joining procedures, especially the unmanned airstrips. Never join anywhere on a circuit altitude unless you establish communication. It says there. The law says 2,000 feet above is where you join. Normally the circuit's at 1,000 feet. Some airfields, due to where it's laying, your joining would be a little bit lower, maybe say 1,500 feet, but it's not 1,000 feet. All right? Why? Do I have to join overhead? Well, if there's a lot of traffic, it's a good idea, but you know, I'm coming in, I call up this airfield and I said, anybody in the traffic at welcome? And they said, yes, so and so and so, we're in so and so. Confirm that runway, and what is your position? And we're going to join now. So I say, I don't say you can't do that. I said, unless you've established communication. Now everybody knows where you are. If you do not listen out and you do not look out, you are just working yourself into trouble. No other, if no other traffic adheres to your intentions of landing at the airfield, still act if someone is occupying the airspace. Follow the procedure always. All right, wait, let me just go a little bit back. I'm calling up welcome ABC, joining for landing anybody in the circuit. Yeah, no, not a word. Now it's a difficult one because maybe there's somebody that's not listening, maybe there's not. Great news, somebody says, yes, we're downwind on runway so and so and so, and you know where everybody is and you can join. So if you don't get any communication, do not think you are super cool and you're super on your own. You might not be. So in conclusion, never start a flight without planning. Planning will reveal what you do not know. Planning will show you what airspaces you need to go through. Planning will show the places that you need to give a miss. Planning will reveal. It will give you the expectations of what is going to happen in the future, also in terms of airspaces. Old planning, well, remember, the non-variable part of the plan is cool, but the rest you must check. Always verify, always set heading procedures, even when electronically guided. Oh my goodness, what is set heading procedures? Nobody's doing that these days. We just on go to button, and the go to button is it? Are we going to Golf Alpha Victor or are we going to Golf Bravo Victor? There's a huge difference. The one is in Gaborone and the other one is in the general flying area of Johannesburg. They look the same. The go-to button doesn't come back to me and say, hey, are you sure you want to go there? So set heading procedures are there. Well, it's the time. What is my heading? Yes, that is the heading. It's on the line and stuff. Now comes the big trick, even if it's electronic. Am I in the correct general direction that I've got to be? If you VFR, you need at least 2 to 3 outside points in reference to you to verify. Yeah, if I'm going in that way, I must expect something to see there. Oh yeah, there it is. I need to see that road. Okay, there goes the road. Yeah, okay. So I can say that I'm in the correct general flying direction. Otherwise, you're going to end up in Scotland. All right, sorry. I just had to say that. especially when electronically guided. VFR means 90% eyes outside the cockpit. I can change that to 99% if you wish. We fly outside and we peep inside. We fly outside and we peep inside. We don't sit here and we peep up. That I've seen a lot. Everybody's sitting inside and they peep outside like that. You got it all wrong. It's look outside and peep inside. It's not looking inside and peeping outside. All right. Sure you got that one. GPS an aid and not a solution. GPS has limited safety advantages. Staring at a GPS is an addiction. You're following the line. Hey, there's a beautiful countryside outside. That's why we are flying. And when you're flying VFR, you have to look out and you've got to in all the information to at least get the exhilaration of flight or the enjoyment or whatever. But sitting and staring inside and peeping outside, bad news. Texting, especially, well, I understand that if you've got the autopilot on and you're sitting at a flight level and you're going to text and you check now and then, there's a couple of thousand feet that is underneath you that's going to be pretty much okay. But whoa, on final approach, oh, hello, who's talking now? Hey, and when I'm sitting next to you and I talk to you, you look at me. Don't look at me, look where you're flying. All right. Okay, for the airspace incursions, until we see next time, have fun.